Hello, friends. It's Wednesday, March 25th, and I am very happy to have Allison Berger here. We are the Würzburger duo. Thanks, Allison, for coming back to play with me.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's nice to be a part of your project.
Yeah, Allison and I have been playing together for over 10 years, and through the course of those 10 years, we have premiered many, many works by women composers, also by male composers, but since we do new music, we do end up playing many female composers these days. We just played I Saw You and I Danced by Minnesota-based composer Shruthi Rajasekar. We're going to talk to her in a minute. But before we do, I wanted to point out you did indeed hear us knocking on our instruments, both Allison and I. Also, I had to maneuver my feet on the pedals and make a little bit of sound that way. So a couple extended techniques in this very fun piece. I also want to remind you that I have a concert coming up on Sunday, March 29th. You can vote for which piece you would like me to play on that. This piece does not qualify. It is just solo piano, so no Würzburger duo on that. But all of the information for that is in the comments. I keep saying comments. In the notes below on the information about this post. Thanks, and let's talk to the composer.
I lived in the UK for a couple of years.
Oh,
so
okay.
so I was a Marshall Scholar over in the UK, so which is like a UK government program to bring like a certain amount of Americans over each year. So I did 2 different master's programs in the UK. I did one in ethnomusicology and one in composition. So
wow, that is so cool.
I grew up in Minnesota and then I left for some years. And so I moved back here during the pandemic. So it's been about 5.5, close to 6 years since I moved back. Yeah, I'm a primarily freelance composer. I'm also a performer. I'm a singer. So I do perform and I do teach some for the singing, but composing is my main work. Yes.
Wow, nice. What are you working on currently?
Ooh, lots of things. 10 or 12.
10 or 12?
Yeah, it's a little bit too much right now. But some of them are longer projects. So one of them is a big orchestral piece for next year. A couple of choral works with some of the choirs in town, as well as actually a few in the UK. And also an educational band consortium, which has been really fun to write educational music too.
And how did you make your way into the world of composing versus just performing or something else?
Yeah, so my background is in Indian classical music as well as Western classical. So I grew up in a household of that. My mother is like a very prominent Indian classical musician. So that was my first language of music, even though I grew up in the States, that's really was my musical expression was, and kind of staying in touch with my community, culturally speaking, was through Indian classical music, specifically Carnatic music. And one amazing thing about mom, talk about, strong female role models, is that she did the traditional, but she also was interested in collaborating. So she worked with jazz musicians and she worked with lots of different kinds of global music. And that included some folks in new music. So they would meet in kind of an improvisatory space. And so that's how she would handshake with other traditions. So that's how I got interested in Western classical music as well. And specifically, like my exposure at first was through new music, which is really cool. I think that a lot of the Western classical education is, canon first and then new music. But for me, it was kind of almost reversed, I would say, in terms of like what I got exposed to early on.
Huh.
So I was always composing, and it was kind of my way of bridging these two musical worlds, as I was becoming a student through school and through just growing up here in the States of Western classical music. I was performing, of course, like with both. I was very interested in performing and collaborating with people on stage, but I think composing was that language to move between these different cultural and musical spaces. So that's kind of how the composing started. I think it became a bigger part of my life, in part because the techniques of singing and Carnatic music and Western classical music are very, very different.
So real quick, when you say Carnatic music, what exactly is that?
Yes, so that is the classical or art tradition of southern India primarily is where it's mostly based. My family's home city of Chennai, India, is like today kind of considered the cultural capital of Carnatic music. But you do find this basically in any of the like regional traditions that are kind of native to South India. So like if you look at languages in India, that usually gives you a sense of the different ethnicities that are there. South and Carnatic, I think the term itself comes from like the British or others labeling it as like the music of that region. But it's characterized by certain things. One big aspect is that it's the same repertoire across instruments. So all instrumentalists are required to learn how to sing because every piece that they're playing actually has text behind it, and it's their job as a flute player, or today the violin is part of the tradition too, like to bring that text to life through their instrumental playing, if that makes sense, like the emotion of the text. So I Saw You in a Dance was actually commissioned by the Royal Northern College of Music for a festival they were doing celebrating Erilyn Wallen, who is one of my favorite composers. And I had the chance to meet her and work with her and get to know her through this. So it was really a special piece that way. She wrote a piece for cello and piano called Dervish. And I Saw You and I Danced was meant to be like a partner performance, basically, but played my piece after. So when I was reading about Dervish and like what prompted her to create this, and she was sort of inspired by Central Asian and South Asian cultures and faiths, I thought, as someone who has South Asian ancestry, I kind of wanted to do the reverse and look to sort of what we might consider European today traditions of faith, like the Judeo-Christian tradition. Of course, that didn't originate in Europe, but it's certainly prevalent there. So I looked at this, I found this quote that said something like, when David saw the Lord, he danced with might and joy. So that's why there's a with might and joy, like tempo marking somewhere in the piece. And the I saw you and I danced is like, from David's perspective. That's why the U is capitalized. It's is meant to refer to a divine entity. That's how I intended it. But at the same time, this is where I probably draw from my own like spiritual beliefs, which is rooted in Hinduism, which is that like love for God is meant to like is mostly meant to be a mirror for like how we deal with our human relationships. So I really was taken with this idea, which is why it says that in the program note of like, what would it be like to express ourselves to the ones we love, like the humans we love, with that much clarity that David had for the Lord, and not to, be too shy to say something about your love, but to just pronounce it so openly. So it is a love song, just like it is also like sort of a religious piece. So it's kind of, I think it's really open to However, the performer can interpret it based on like their personal cultural context and religious context of if they want to think of it as a love number or think of that as a spiritual love, a human love, a romantic love, intimacy love, any kind of form of love. But that's the idea of like the kind of what religiously we might call surrender, or in human words we might call trust, like total trust. I think that's what the idea is behind the piece.